Hi, this is Kimberly from Carmichael, California, and you're listening to Two Broads Talking Politics.
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I am joined today by Natalie Stites Means, who is running for mayor of Rapid City, South Dakota. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. We're having a little bit of a theme so far this year of women running for mayor, which I love. Could you just start by telling me a little bit about your background and why you decided to run for mayor?
Sure. You know, I have spent a great majority of my career engaging in political organizing, community organizing, and I have, been involved in public policy early on in my career. Before I went to law school, I was awarded a fellowship 20 years ago, and I was the first Native American to get an Assembly State Fellowship to work for the California State Assembly as a special legislative aide. So that fellowship sort of involved me in, for the first time, sort of mainstream electoral politics. I worked for a legislator out of San Francisco at the time. Her name is Carol Megden, and she was chairwoman of the appropriations. So you can imagine I got an insider's view of a lot of different functionings and the way the system works there in the state capitol. And shortly after that fellowship, I joined the governor's administration in his Office of Education, and I worked as a higher education policy advisor for a few years. And then I went to law school, and I applied to law school, and I was admitted to a really highly competitive program, a specialized program in public interest law and policy. So I got my Juris Doctor in 2007 with a specialization in public interest law and policy. And I started off my career in Indian country. I am a tribal member from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe in South Dakota. And I grew up in East Los Angeles, California, and took advantage of the public higher education system there. I went to community college and worked full-time for a couple of years, and then I transferred to UCLA as an undergraduate. I spent a couple of years in the state capitol, and then I went to law school. After law school, I came out to work for the Ho-Chunk Nation, the tribe in Wisconsin, as a law clerk and a staff attorney there. And then I came back to South Dakota in 2009, almost 10 years ago, to work for my tribe and to help the Indian people. I say that because it's pretty much the way that, it's looked at. My grandmother knew I was going to school, and she said, well, you're going to come back and help, right? And there was really she didn't frame it in a question either. So I've been working for tribal government, tribal organizations for the past decade. And in the last couple of years, I was doing training and technical assistance for tribes with juvenile justice and tribal youth related grants. And that center came to an end. The federal contract was awarded to another provider. And I started doing some independent and private consulting since then. So I've had some extra time since December that I ordinarily wouldn't have. And the reason why I'm running is because somebody reached out, an organization here in Rapid City reached out to me, and I participate with them and have supported their efforts to unite the city. They're called One Rapid City, and they were tracking the passage of a anti-panhandlers ordinance here in Rapid City that was being passed by the city council. And we activated and, we got people involved. We had myself as an advocate. We had, attorneys. We had former homeless people. We had current panhandlers. We had second generation panhandlers all speak out against the city passing this ordinance. And the ordinance really is inconsistent with the direction of homeless advocacy. Recently, there was a decision that came down that prohibited, the regulation of free speech by panhandlers and the people who they're asking from. So we knew it was going in a bad direction on a public policy side of things, and then further on a human side of things. And frankly, the the lack of compassion and the lack of understanding about what it was they were doing when they were passing an ordinance that would increase fines, double the amount of fines, and put people in jail for up to 30 days if they were perceived of as aggressively panhandling in the city. That was really, for me, a microcosm of what is wrong in Rapid City and what needs to change. They had no ears for us as citizens. We were concerned about the racial issues because 70% of our homeless people here in Rapid City are Native American. And we were concerned about, the additional burdens on the poor who are struggling and who are in crisis, who don't have homes, who don't have employment. And all of these pleas just fell on deaf ears. And we went to 2 different hearings, and we realized that half of the people up on the dais across from us were up for re-election. And we started to organize and to find people who were committed to challenging what is going on here in Rapid City. We have found that as Natives, we are not the only ones being shut out. A lot of people are being shut out of city government. They're not being listened to when issues of concern come up. And that's when we realized that the only office to run for that had an at-large race, the other ones were smaller city council ward-based races. Mm-hmm. We realized that if we didn't run somebody for mayor, we really wouldn't know, what is the support out there for us as Native Americans, or what is the Lakota vote, what is the Native vote in Rapid City. And so I honestly spoke with so many people who I respect and admire, and here in this city to run for mayor, and for a variety of reasons, very legitimate reasons, people couldn't do it. And I thought, well, I think this is the perfect time for me to step up and run for office. And so that's what I decided to do. I decided to do it 5 days before the petition deadline.
So tell me a little bit about Rapid City for people who aren't as familiar with South Dakota.
Sure. Well, Rapid City is the gateway city to the Black Hills. And it is a city of approximately 76,000 people, about a metropolitan area of about 110,000 people. The region, I suppose. We are a high tourist destination point here in Rapid City and contribute the most overall to tourism here in the state of South Dakota due to, Mount Rushmore, due to the Crazy Horse Monument, and, the whole presidential focus and theme of the city due to Mount Rushmore really attracts, millions of people per year. A really important defining feature, though, of Rapid City is that Rapid City was incorporated shortly around the time, or right around the time where the Black Hills were taken from the Great Sioux Nation. And the Great Sioux Nation is the number of tribes, and today they are tribal governments. There's 9 of them in South Dakota. And that has become rather a prominent story of how the land was taken from the Lakota people. And we have a court case in 1980, United States v. Sioux, where the United States Supreme Court recognized that it was an illegal taking that was conducted by the United States, and that we were entitled to compensation for that, just compensation. And we have, as the tribes, have refused to take that settlement money. And so for a lot of years during that time and after the Black Hills were settled, that tension has really defined a lot of what our experiences here are. Our ties here are ancestral. These are our homelands. And yet there seems to be a very strong effort to erase us from these homelands. I spoke with an elder of mine here in this community, and she grew up in the 1940s here, and she remembers the No Indians Allowed signs in downtown Rapid City. And while we certainly don't have the reputation for segregation, in fact, segregation has been a very real experience here for Native Americans. We are in a white majority city. There non-natives are the great majority, but we do have a significant number of immigrants who are coming in to participate in the tourist workforce. We need them. We need their labor. And we also have a significant number of military veterans who are also people of color, often from the military base right outside Rapid City. And a common nickname for people of this town, I mean, it's not a point of pride. It should be a point of shame. Is Rapid City's nickname is Racist City. On the other hand, I truly believe that with some culturally competent, with educated leadership, that Rapid City can move out of its history and towards a better future. We find a lot of people are interested in doing that, but for some reason there hasn't been a strong leadership hasn't emerged on a citywide level. And I'm a working class person. I'm highly educated, but I also carry a heavy student debt, like most people in my position at my age. And I'm 43 years old, and I got my degree 12 years ago, my law degree. And there's a lot of opportunity to create something better, something more unified for Rapid City based on all of our demographics and characteristics. But that resistance there is very strong. And I think it has a lot to do with maybe misinformation. Like our community right now is talking a lot about the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which is the ACE study. And that explains a lot of different types of trauma in people's lives and how childhood trauma affects one later on in life. But as far as the tribes here, we were discussing the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study as Native American people 7 years ago. I was working on an initiative for the Rosebud Sioux tribe, and we met the founder and the primary author of that study. So there just seems to be a lag in terms of awareness about really important social issues. When the Panhandler Ordinance was being debated, I heard from business owners and from the elected officials some really outdated and dubious theories of how personal behavior happens, how psychology changes, and all these things. Why I thought, has anyone here consulted with a doctor, a psychologist on these matters? Because it was really, really unhelpful, outdated, and uneducated type of opinions that were being provided in a public forum. And with my expertise and my knowledge, I thought, there's nobody here who is better than any of us. And I think the city could really benefit from our voices being centered instead of completely ignored and marginalized, which is how I felt coming out of that ordinance debate.
So your campaign slogan is One City, All Voices. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how that feeds into your platform?
We need to have a unified effort here in Rapid City. There have been efforts, and there's an ongoing effort among non-natives and natives alike who are trying to bring people together, who are trying to bring the latest information and research around, social inequality, around toxic stress, around adverse childhood experiences, but none of them have been amplified or centered in the city politic. And when I started to research, what Rapid City, the latest issues and so forth, I found out that there's a federal consent decree against the city and the county for them to be compliant with the American Disabilities Act. And that's been going on for a few years. I've found out that the lesbian, gay, transgender, queer, bisexual community are extremely marginalized here in the city, and that the attempts that they have made to try to introduce some municipal level legislation around inclusion have been not only just rejected, they've been ignored. And then, you look a little bit deeper into the data here particularly around criminal justice. And while, Native Americans have been mass incarcerated in this state and in this city for a couple decades now, there's a 900% increase rate in incarceration of Native Americans since 1977. I'm finding that it's much more broader. I didn't know that when I sat down and looked up the history of mayors, I had no idea that there's never been a woman mayor here in Rapid City. They have all been men. And there has only been one Native American. And curiously, this Native American, he's actually Santee Sioux, which the great population of Native Americans here come from the Pine Ridge, Oglala Sioux tribe, and the Rosebud Sioux tribe, which are kind of closer to us, to the city. But my campaign slogan is about trying to unite across all of these different divisions that we have, and really about trying to feature and position the role of our city government in its proper place, and that is to help the people and to represent the people. And instead, we've had a city government who does very well at representing the powerful and the elite in our town and excluding the rest of our voices. There's a lot of talk about supporting working people and about supporting our veterans and our active military duty here in town. But when you look at where the resources are and when you look at where the economic development plans are going, and you see that the interests of the powerful are very well represented by our public officials, while the actual public is not. There's nowhere to be found. So my campaign slogan is about trying to bring in every single voice into the city and to ensure that our elected officials actually represent who they're supposed to represent. Because I'll tell you that the powerful and the elite here, they represent themselves very well, with or without an elected official. They're at the table. But our disabled people, our homeless people, or the great majority of Native Americans here in this town, the LGBTQ community, other people of color, our immigrants, working class families, we're not at the table. And in fact, when we try to get to the table, we are shut out. So my campaign slogan is about recognizing that the interests of our community are found in our people, and all of our voices deserve to be at the table, to be listened to be heard, and more importantly, to be acted upon. And that's why we came up with this slogan to characterize what we're trying to do in running for mayor. You know, my platform is, we have issues, and the priorities of my platform, it's a 9-point platform. And it really is about putting people first. Our youth and our elders are often marginalized in this town. They are not at the table. And they're really, those, our elders and our youth who are in our homes, they can't work. They don't work. They don't play that income earning role in our households. But when we center them in our decision making, perhaps around, say, a viable public transportation system, which we have a very, very limited public transportation system here. If we center them, that's going to be good for everyone. And so we're looking at centering youth and senior citizens. We're looking at centering veterans and active duty. The transition, particularly from being active duty to veterans, we're going to have more and more of our servicemen and women who are facing that transition who need support. And the mayor needs to be a champion for them, not just refer them back to the offices and programs that aren't working for them, but rather championing their issues and taking it on. And that's what I propose I'm all about when I become mayor. And working families are also a big issue here in Rapid City. We have a lot of developers, financiers, bankers, lawyers, and all those kind of people in charge of our economic development. And yet, South Dakota is one of the most unsafe places in the United States for a worker. Very high rate of workplace death and injury. And our city needs to look at changing that and putting in protections for workplace safety for our workers and our working families. So the people are really first in my platform, and then looking at how to address some of the more important issues around sustainable economic growth, looking at how justice and public safety need to be reimagined. Here, there's 4,500 people have active warrants in this town, and it's estimated that it may even be up to 1/4 of all Native Americans have a warrant, and that needs to change. And I've looked to different towns, similar towns. You have Ferguson, you have St. Louis, you have Oakland, you have Houston and Baton Rouge and San Francisco, and all of them are doing exciting things around justice reform that this city needs to do. The other important part is keeping the Black Hills beautiful. The tourism here, it's not just about Mount Rushmore. It also is about, we have pristine water. We have beautiful forests. And the Black Hills really diminishes it. This is a mountain range of extraordinarily geologically important, land masses, mountains, and we need to protect that as a city. And right now, our city doesn't advocate at all for any type of protection and just tends to go along with the business interests that are very powerful here. We're facing a threat to our water supply around mining that I hope my campaign will help to amplify and bring to the attention of the people here in Rapid City. If a spill were to happen, I think it's connected to the uranium mining, if I'm not mistaken, or new gold mining that's been proposed. Our water supply could be completely contaminated within 26 minutes of a spill. So that threat is very real. And we need champions in city government who understand these threats and who understand that consensus building and bringing in more people into these decision-making spaces is what needs to happen, not excluding more and more and more people from these very consequential public policy decisions.
If our listeners would like to help out your campaign, how can they do that?
We are on all the social media platforms as @MeansForMayor. So that's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Also, I have a website at www.meansformayor.com. And this is a grassroots campaign. And so we need money and we need time. And we need those support out there to help shine a light on Rapid City. I think that one of the most interesting things that's emerged is that, we are the first, myself, I'm the first Native American woman to run for mayor. And we are in several of the wards also have the first Native American woman running for office as well for aldermen. And we have an aldermanic form of government, and 5 wards in our city. And all of those things point to how this idea of expanding and including our voices is critical to the future. There's no way that Rapid City can move into a prosperous, compassionate future without uniting all of the different peoples who are here. So we don't just need help on that ordinary campaign, level of, donations and volunteers, and you have your ground campaign. We need all of that as well. But we also need moral support for what it is that we're doing here, because I've really been stunned personally by the outpouring of support from our young people, from young Native Americans who had no idea that anyone could even run for mayor who's like them. And that has been really emotional to regard. And I have even, people in our community, non-Native and Native, who are just so excited that myself and others have stepped up in this way. So that moral support and that support for awareness of what we're doing here, I think is critical. And anyone can do that from any place in the world.
Excellent. Well, we'll put links up on our website, your social media, and your website so that people can check that out. And I hope they will follow along and help provide that support. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure to talk about?
Oftentimes when you're running for office, and I have been involved in a number of campaigns throughout the years, I'm not the incumbent, so I'm focusing on the problems and the challenges. My opponent's had 4 years to do it. He's a former police chief, a career police officer, who has a long history here in Rapid City. But I think that that type of leadership has been maximized, and we've done all we can with it. And it's time for a new leadership going into the future that is inspired by, the general national trend for Native American women stepping up into political office. And I'm proud to be part of this phenomenon. So thank you.
Thank you so much for running and for speaking with me today.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant-Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Wethlin and was created for use by this podcast.